All right. So I have been asked specifically about this multiple choice question. Do you want me to cover any of the other ones, or?
No, I got the other ones correct.
All right. So this multiple choice question outlines two classes, dog and underdog. Each of those two classes has a method act, and each of those two classes has a method eat. The dog version of act prints run and calls eat. The dog version of eat prints eat. The underdog version of act calls the superclasses version of act, prints sleep. The underdog version of eat prints the superclass version of eat and prints bark. So if I create a new underdog object and I call that object dot act, what will we see printed? So if it has a dog reference type, but underdog object type, which version of act is going to be called when I call it? Underdog's version of act. This is part of polymorphism. So both of them have that act method. It'll call the more appropriate one. So it's going to call this version of act. So the first thing we do is we call super.act. So it's going to jump up into here and print run. So first we see run. Next, we're going to call eat. Now, which eat would it make more sense for this to call here?
Eat in the.
I feel like it would make more sense to call the eat in the dog class.
Yeah.
Apparently, it's going to call the eat in the subclass.
Yeah, that's what confused me because
Yeah, I don't know. I'm confused about this a little bit as well, personally. So when we call eat, we're actually going to call the subclasses version of the eat method. Possibly because we called act on our underdog object in the first place, and it always checks there first when a method is called. I'm not 100% sure on that one. But the correct answer has this sequence. So we call the eat method, in which we call super.eat. So we're jumping back up into the superclass. We print eat. Space there. Run and then eat. And then we're going to step back out of this eat method. We're done with it. So we print bark. Now the eat method is finished. We'll jump back up here. The act method is finished. We'll jump back up here. And then we can print sleep.
Yeah, I didn't put the sleep or I didn't put bark in it.
Yeah, so the answer that I think is most intuitive is the one without bark.
Yeah.
Because that's what you get if you call this version of eat instead of this version of eat first.
Yeah.
So that is the answer that I would have assumed was correct. But based on what we see here, anytime we call a method, as long as we have, or like it's going to reference the object type first, no matter where the method was called from. So we see eat, run, eat, bark, sleep. All right, and which of the FRQ topics do you want to cover? We've got our writing in class.
This was the class one and then
the class one first.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
And then yeah, just not the light board.
Not the light board. Okay. So we are given this prompt. This question involves the implementation of a fitness tracking system that is represented by the StepTracker class. A StepTracker object is created with a parameter that defines the minimum number of steps that must be taken for a day to be considered active. The StepTracker class provides a constructor and the following methods: add daily steps, active days, and average steps, which returns the average number of steps per day divided by, or calculated by dividing the total number of steps taken by the number of days tracked. So if we look at this example here, we've got some examples of our constructor, active days, average steps, and daily steps, and just lots of different examples of the different methods being called here. So
there's only 3 that are being called already.
So there's only these 3 methods being called: add daily steps, active days, and average steps. So add daily steps, active days, average steps, active days, So it's just a whole bunch of different examples, and they're not ordered in any way, which is kind of frustrating, but I don't know. So we are asked to implement this class. We are including the constructor and any required instance variables and methods. So if we look at this definition, let's first figure out what instance variables we might need to keep track of. So we definitely know we've got one for our constructor. It's going to define the minimum number of steps per day. So steps per day. We want to probably track the number of active days. We want to track total steps taken. What other thing might we need? Humans information about steps. Let's see.
I think those should cover it, right? Because it'll be the
cover it.
Because it'll be like the total steps taken, like divided by the number of days to like its average. Right?
Let's call this one. That should be lowercase m. But min steps per day. I think. Okay, I think when we call add daily steps, that's just going to update our total steps taken. And if it hits that quota, we'll increase our number of active days. So I think this is all the instance variables we need. So let's actually go to my whiteboard. So we are going to be implementing the public StepTracker class. So public StepTracker. Oh, there's a word missing here. Word class. Public class StepTracker. So there's our class header. We have our instance variables, which we want all of them to be private. So 3 instance variables. I think all of them could be integers. We had it.
Min number of steps.
Min steps, active days, and total steps. So those are all integers. Min steps. I'm going to shorten the names a little from what I wrote before. Int act days and int total steps. All right, so our constructor is going to get only one parameter, which is the minimum number of steps per day. Or should we initialize the other ones too? We want to make sure that we give a value to all of our instance variables.
The other ones should be 0.
The other ones should start at 0. So our public.
This is the constructor, right?
This is our constructor, yep. StepTracker. We're going to get int, I'm going to call it min, say min steps equals min, and then act days and total steps are both going to equal 0. All right, so we've got our constructor, we've initialized all of our instance variables. now we have three different methods to write. Add daily steps. I'll put these up here. Add daily steps, active days, and average steps. So our add daily steps method, let's look at our problem, our prompt, see what kind of value we might expect as a parameter for add daily steps. If you look at our examples for add daily steps, looks like all these are going to be integer values. So we're gonna probably get an integer parameter for that one.
But they're not returning anything.
So our add daily steps, I don't think is going to return anything. So that one should be a void method. Active days is going to return the number of active days. That's just a getter method. So we don't need a parameter for that one. It's going to return an int value.
Do you write static parameter or?
We're not going to write static because we're going to be dealing with instance variables here.
Okay.
And so if we are going to deal with instance variables, we cannot be static.
Okay.
All right, and then our average steps method is going to return the average number of steps per day, calculated by dividing the total number of steps by the number of days tracked. And if we look at our average steps, it looks like those are returning a double value. So we want to make sure that we are returning a double value. So let's go back to the whiteboard. So add daily steps is going to be void. Active days is going to be an int. Average steps is going to be a double. So let's go ahead and implement one of those. We're going to have our public void add daily steps. And we're going to get an int steps for our parameter. All right, so what are we going to do with our daily steps or with that steps variable?
The total steps plus equals.
Total steps plus equals.
That's it, right?
We want to keep track of if this was an active day or not.
Okay, but don't we do that in the active days method or?
So active days is just going to return the value of this variable.
Oh, so we do it here and then just
So
return.
we'll do it in here and add to active days if this number of steps qualified as an active day.
Okay.
So we want to check if this number of steps met that minimum number.
Right.
So if,
Wait, we check the total steps or just steps?
so just the daily steps.
Okay.
So if the today's number of steps met that threshold, we increase our number of active days by 1. So if steps was greater than or equal to min steps, active days plus plus. So we want to increase our number of active days by 1 when we meet the threshold for a single day of activity. I think that's all we need to do in this method. Because we're never going to update our min steps. That one should stay as it is. But we're going to be updating both of those in that add daily steps method. I'm going to draw a little bit of a line. Move that curly bracket to the other side of the line. So let's write the active days method next. It's going to be a public int active days. I don't need any parameters. This is just essentially a getter method. This is going to return active days. That one's a very simple method. And then our last method is our average steps method, where we're going to divide our days by our total steps. So we're going to make a public double average steps. And since this is just going to be dealing with multiple of our instance variables, this one also doesn't need any parameters. So
Just return return total steps divided by.
return total steps
But those two values are both
divided by act days. Yep. So what do we want to do there?
you change one of them to double.
We can just typecast as a double here. So if we do and small it up a little bit, we can say double of that. Now, if we look at our problem statement, we see that sometimes our active days return 0, so our average steps is going to return 0.0. Is that what will happen in our current code? No, why not?
You can't divide by 0.
You can't divide by 0. So what should we do to fix that problem? We'll probably do an if statement. So if act days isn't 0, then return exactly that calculation.
Else return.
Else return 0.
That'll return it as 0.0.
And then yeah, it'll implicitly cast that int 0 to a double. So yeah, Java will happily handle putting a 0.0 at the end of any int.
Okay.
And there we go. There is our StepTracker class. I feel like that accomplishes every goal that we have there. So let's take a look at our rubric. Okay. All right, so declares all private instance variables. Actually, let's look at their example. Okay. Okay, so I think there's 2 days that we should be tracking here. So we missed one thing. If we look at our average steps, and we want the total number of days tracked, not just the number of active days.
Okay.
So we should have also included just a number of days that we add 1 to anytime we add daily steps. So that's something that we missed, and our calculation for average steps is going to be slightly off because we're divided by a different number than we expected.
Oh, we're not divided by number of days.
Yeah, we want to divide by the total number of days rather than the active days.
Okay.
But let's see what points we would have earned here. So I think we might not have earned this point because we did not declare all the appropriate variables. We missed one. We definitely did declare our constructor header, uses parameter and appropriate values to initialize instance variables. We definitely did initialize the instance variables that we had. I think we were in that point. Declares header, public void add daily steps. We did that. Identifies active days and increments count. So we definitely identified active days. We did I think that's this one that we would update appropriately. So actually, we would earn this one, identifying the active day and incrementing the count of active days. I don't know if we would earn this one because we missed total days. It's possible that we might earn this one because we did update the variable that we had. So that one maybe. Declares and implements public int active days. Definitely did that. Declares header public double average steps. Returns calculated double average number of steps. So I think that we would probably have earned 7 points on this one. And we definitely didn't have any of those negative points.
Yeah.
So there we have it. There is that FRQ. Let's take a gainer at number 6. Many encoded strings contain delimiters. A delimiter is a non-empty string that acts as a boundary between different parts of a larger string. The delimiters involved in this question occur in pairs that must be balanced, with each pair having an open delimiter and a closed delimiter. There will be only one type of delimiter for each string. The following are examples of delimiters. Expressions in mathematics use open parentheses and closed parentheses as delimiters. For each open parenthesis, there must be a matching closed parenthesis. So if we look at this example, we see an open and a close. We have matched our number. This next one, we have an open, and a close. That is not going to, we're not matching all of our opens with a close. Therefore, it's not a valid expression. Another type of delimiter is the triangle bracket with a letter inside. So the B header, whatever this is called in HTML. I don't remember what they're called. Tag. That's what they are. So the B and then the /B tag. So here we have a delimiter that is more than one character long. That whole sequence, triangle B, triangle bracket, is its own delimiter. So if we have open and close, that is valid HTML. If we have open and we are not closing the same kind of thing, or closing a UB rather than just a B, which is what we opened, we are not matching. This is not valid. So we have our delimiters class. We have our 2 strings, open delimiter and closed delimiter. We are going to have our constructor where we are identifying and initializing both open and closed delimiters. We are going to build in part A method that returns an array list of delimiters from the array tokens as described in part A. So we'll look at part A in a minute. This method is called public array list string get delimiters list from a string array of tokens. And then the method is balanced, which we'll make in part B, will return true if the delimiters are balanced and false otherwise. So part A string containing text and possibly delimiters has been split into tokens and stored in the string array tokens. Each token is either an open delimiter, a closed delimiter, or a substring that is not a delimiter. You will write the method getDelimitersList, which returns an array list containing all of the open and closed delimiters found in tokens in their original order. Following examples show the contents of an array list returned by the getDelimitersList method for different open and closed delimiters, different tokens arrays. So if my open and close are open and close parentheses, my tokens list or array might be open parenthesis x plus y, close parenthesis times 5. Our delimiters here are those open and close parentheses. If our open and close are HTML tags with the letter Q inside, our tokens is open Q, YY, close Q, ZZ, close Q. We see those 3 delimiters in our list. We would return that array list. So let's go ahead and build that method.
What is that stuff in the class information for this question?
So this is showing you what things are present within this class. So we've got our 2 instance variables that we have. We've got our constructor, and then these are the 2 methods that we are going to have to work with. Although we are implementing both of those methods. So I think, yeah, and then part B will be, where's the header for B? Actually, is that different? No, it's the same. Is balance is going to get an array list of strings. So I assume that when we're running this code, we would call get delimiters list and pass its return value to is balanced. So we're getting an array list of values. we're going to count the number of opens, count the number of closed, and then return whether or not we are valid. Actually, yeah, we want to make sure that it's also valid in sequence. So if we look here, we have open, open, close, open, close, close. So that sequence is valid. We're not trying to close anything before we open a new one. Or we're not trying to close multiple before we've opened a new one. Where in example 2, we are open, close, close. We've gone negative on our closes. So even though there is an equal number of opens and closes, we've closed before we've opened something, which we can't do. So, and then yeah, here, that's obviously not going to work. So let's start on part A. I'm going to open up my whiteboard again so I have more space. Go to a new page. So we are going to be building the method. Let me find the header so I can just write it in here. You're going to need to write the method header for all of the methods that you write. We're going to write public. We're going to build an array list of strings called get delimiters with a string list or string array called tokens. So our instance variables are our open delimiter and closed delimiter variables. So we know which strings we're looking for. So if we want to return an array list of strings, probably want to build that array list of strings. We want to create it. So array list of string objects. What should we call this?
What is it getting?
It's gonna be full of delimiters.
Just delimiters.
Let's call it dels,
Yeah.
just to save some writing time. So dels is going to equal a new array list of string objects. Open close parenthesis to call the constructor, and there we go. So we are now ready to look at all of the values. Are we going to be changing our string array of tokens? No. So all we need to do is access every element. And I feel like the easiest way to accomplish that is to use a for each loop. So we're going to use a for string token in tokens.
String tokens like your own array. It's like I basically.
Yeah, I'm creating my iterator variable. So the type obviously needs to match the type of the collection or whatever is being collected. So each individual element is a string, and token is going to have the value of each of the individual tokens one at a time. So we want to check for each of these tokens if they are one of our two delimiters, right? So if token dot equals open del, that's one of our instance variables. If it equals open del, or token dot equals close del,
Add it to the array.
then we're going to add it to the array list. Then dels dot add.
Is the dot add on the quick reference? Or
I believe so. I can double check real quick. Let's share. Have it here. Aha. Got it first. Yeah, so array lists, we've got add, we've got get, set, remove. All those methods are there.
Okay.
So let's go back to here. back to the whiteboard. So if the token we're looking at is equal to the open delimiter or equal to the closed delimiter, we're going to add it to our sequence. Is there anything else we need to do in this entire list or in this entire loop?
No, that's it.
No, that's it. So if anytime we see one of the things we're looking for, add it to del's, and at the end, then return del's. There we go. So there is part A. And then we want to look at part B. Let's reread part B real quick, so we get full grasp of what we need to do. So the is balanced method returns true when the delimiters are balanced and false otherwise. Delimiters are balanced when both of the following conditions are satisfied. When traversing the array list from the first element to the last element, there is no point at which there are more closed delimiters than open delimiters at or before that point. And the total number of open delimiters is equal to the total number of closed delimiters. So if ever we find more closed than open delimiters, we exit the loop. If ever we, or when we get to the end, if our numbers don't balance, we exit, we return false.
And the first condition is be checking if the array is even, like that.
So not necessarily, we could have an entire 4-element array of all closed or all open. So I think the easiest way to do this would be each time through the loop, we're going to loop through, or we can have like an open count and a close count. Actually, I think we can just have an open count. Each time we see an open, we increase by 1. Anytime we see a close, we subtract 1. So we're going to keep looping as long as this is greater than or equal to 0. If ever we see it go negative, we can return false. And then at the end of the loop, what should open equal?
How much do you believe in number?
Open should equal, I think it should equal 0.
Yeah,
Because it should add and subtract to it back to 0.
Yeah.
So we can return whether or not that equals 0 at the very end to determine if it's balanced or not.
Yeah.
So let's go back to our whiteboard. I'm just gonna write it on the bottom half. I don't want to actually overwrite it. There you go. So our other method is called is balanced. No, don't go away. I need that window open. Okay. It's fine what that method signature looks like. Public Boolean is balanced. And we're going to get an array list of strings here. Shucks, I'm not going to be able to fit that nicely. Let's try and do this. With an array list of strings called delimiters. Perfect. Never didn't have that.
So they can just make int open count equal to 0 to begin with.
So we're gonna start our open as 0.
And a for each loop, or
Yeah. Do we care about indices here?
no, it doesn't matter.
No, doesn't matter at all. So we're gonna do another for each for string. I'll call it del in delimiters. We're going to check if it's an open or closed delimiter. So if del dot equals open del,
Plus plus, and then if it's closed,
then we can say open plus plus. Now, are there any other potential options besides it being the open delimiter? Like could it be anything besides open or close.
So you're gonna say
So,
else.
You say an else. Else open minus minus. And I've run out of vertical space. So we're just gonna,
Just shrink the top one. No.
you're right.
Or you can just make the other method smaller. Too.
I could make the other method smaller. That would probably be a little bit easier. That doesn't move. There we go. That's what the letter I looks like. Anyway, okay. So inside of our loop, we want to check as long as open is greater than or equal to 0. Actually, let's check the opposite because we can return false in that scenario. So if open is less than 0, return false.
What happens if it's greater than 0?
If it's greater than 0, that's okay. That means we've found at least one open.
Oh, okay.
So we only want to return false when we've found a close before we found a matching open. I'm going to make the rest of it smaller. I like that suggestion.
I guess. Yeah. Can you just use an or there? Say if it's like less than 0 or equal or not equal to, or
I think we don't want to exit the loop until the very end. So at the very end, when it we're going to check if our open is equal to 0. There we go. This and that. No, you're not changing size. There you go. You can move up. All right. Perfect. So if open is less than 0, return false. I think that's all we need to do inside of this for loop. And then after the loop, we want to check, is open equal to 0? If it is, we'll return true. Otherwise, we'll return false. So we can actually just return that Boolean comparison. Return open equals 0. If return is even, or if return is 0, that means we have an equal number of opens and closes. If it's not 0, we have more opens than closes, we'll return false. And then we can close our curly bracket for the method.
that's all of it, right?
And there we have it. That's the whole thing. So I hope that makes sense.
I had one question. How much of a difference is it between like array list and 1D arrays?
So like structurally, they're very similar. It's the array lists just allow you to change their size.
Oh, okay.
So like, and you have to use methods to get or set values rather than square brackets.
So for like 1D arrays, you can't have like an empty spot basically.
I mean, you can't really have an empty spot in an array list either, because like.
But we don't know the size of the array list.
Yeah, we don't know the size of the array list. We can get the size. You can just call the size method, but it's in flux. It's not going to stay constant, or it doesn't have to stay constant.
And for array list, it's dot size, right? For the
Correct. Dot size and with parentheses.
and the other ones is dot length. Right?
Yes.
Right.
So I believe that is on the quick reference. Yeah. So int size. This is you call your array list object dot size with parentheses for your array list. And it doesn't look like it has it for arrays. So yeah, arrays are just dot length with no parentheses. Strings are dot length with parentheses.
Okay.
Because Java is super consistent and we love it. Okay, so that was those two FRQs from this section. I did also cover day 5. If you'd like to watch that, or not day 5, the Lightboard one. If you'd like to watch it or read through my slides, I uploaded those. So,